talk a little bit about food insecurity and the impact of the cost of living crisis. In the Food Foundation, we've been doing lots of both tracking of food prices and also the affordability of healthy diets, and also food insecurity and people's experiences of being able to access the food that they need. So I'm going to present a little bit of that data and then a little bit of a call to action at the end. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So here you can see on our website we have a food price tracker. The URL for the tracker is on the screen there, and here we show the data of the cost of a basket of goods. This is a Tesco basket, and we track online prices every week. You can see the picture of the basket of goods, and this is a basket that fits broad nutritional criteria within the broad context of the Eat Well guide. It's a little bit different. The consumer price index data is obviously very useful for tracking overall inflation, but it doesn't really look like an actual basket when you look at the items within the CPI index, which is why we've been gathering this data alongside the CPI. We have a basket which is sized for a woman and one for a man because of obviously slight calorie differences. And you can see here the rapid escalation in prices since April. In fact, this is a steeper rate of increase than we've seen in the CPI data more broadly. So prices have gone up by more than 15% since the beginning of April. Next slide, please. And this is having a very serious impact on levels of food insecurity. So we came into this crisis with already elevated levels of food insecurity, which were heightened during the COVID pandemic. But what we've been doing is tracking food insecurity at the national level since the start of the pandemic, so for more than 2 years now. And we've done now 11 rounds of data collection. And on the left-hand side here, you can see the levels of food insecurity amongst households with children on the red line and without children in the blue line. And we show how these trends have changed over the last, since April 2020. And you can see now that we have a situation where we have 1 in 4 households with children are experiencing food insecurity. So that's when the adults report having skipped meals, gone for a whole day without eating, or gone hungry and not eaten in the last month. So this is the month of September 2022. And I think what's important to note also about this graph is that while households with children are always at higher risk of food insecurity than households without children, that those two lines have diverged in the last 6 months, and that the situation has become have widened, and the situation has come more steeply deteriorated for households with children. We think that perhaps some of the reasons for that is that some of the cost of living interventions have involved flat payments, which have been the same regardless of whether there's a household with 1 person or a household with 5 people, and so inadvertently disadvantaging households with children. I should say, by the way, that these data are all UK-wide. And then on the right-hand side, we show the particular breakdown for households with children, showing that the more children that you have, the higher risk of food insecurity that you face. So we've got a situation now where almost half of households with 3 or more children have experienced food insecurity in the past month. And overall, we have a situation where at the national level, UK level, 4 million children are living in households where adults are reporting food insecurity. Next slide, please. And these are some of the risk factors. In addition to having children, obviously being in receipt of universal credit is a particular risk factor. This is important when we're also thinking about policy interventions and ways of targeting resources to protect people from the worst effects of the cost of living crisis. So we have a situation where more than half of households that are in receipt of universal credit experienced food insecurity in the past month. This is a particular risk factor, seems to be a form of benefit which poses additional risks over and above other forms of benefit. And we think that that is partly to do with the 5-week wait, which takes place when people come on to universal credit. And then on the right-hand side, start to delve into some of the potential knock-on impacts on diet. So here, this reflects a question in our survey, which is around cutting back on fruits and vegetables. And you can see on the left-hand side, the food insecure households and the very high proportion of them that have reported cutting back on fruits and vegetables in the past month, in comparison on the right-hand side to the food secure households. So we've yet to see this really start to translate into reports on sales. So there is some sales of fruits and vegetables. There is some emerging evidence that this reported behaviour we're now starting to see that in terms of sales data and drops in purchases of fruits and vegetables. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of more broadly what the impacts are on diets, this is a visual that was published in the evidence pack for the National Food Strategy, which is an independent review commissioned for England and published just over a year ago now. And here you can see along the bottom, this visual represents all the products on offer in grocery retail and ranks them according to their nutrient profile score along the x-axis, and up the side on the y-axis, the price per calorie. And so all products which are to the right-hand side of the red line are unhealthier products. So these are products which are high in fat, sugar and salt and have a nutrient profile score more than 4. And on the left-hand side, the healthier products. And you can see very strikingly that the products on the left-hand side of the red line tend to be more expensive per calorie. There are some, of course, very cheap sources of calories like pulses on the left-hand side, but a lot of those fruits and vegetables are much higher cost per calorie. And so you can imagine if you're in a situation where you're really struggling to be able to afford food, you're being pushed towards cheaper forms of calories, and they might be foods which are less risky. Everyone's going to eat them at home. You might waste less of them. And they tend to be energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods, which fill up tummies, but don't really optimize health. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So we can see, if you could change the slide, please. Thank you. And you can see here the impacts of inflation on different types of food categories. So we've got a sort of backdrop of unhealthy calories being 3 times cheaper per calorie than healthy calories. And we've also seen the impacts of inflation differentially affecting different categories. In the run-up to April of this year, we saw healthy food increase at twice the rate of less healthy food. And you can see here that confectionery, for example, amongst the CPI index, shows the lowest rates of inflation. So we've got a situation where there's a sort of widening gap between the cost of healthy calories and the cost of unhealthy calories. The next slide, please. So we can expect to see, as I said, impacts in terms of purchases of fruits and vegetables, and already starting to see that reflected in sales data. So Nielsen has been reporting a basket of 37 food products. With Reuters, they've shown that fresh vegetable sales fell by more than 6% in August in comparison to sales of snacks and confectionery, which rose by 4%. So starting to see the knock-on impacts in terms of potential dietary outcomes. The next slide, please. So we can expect that the health consequences of the cost of living crisis to be played out through diets, but also through a range of other factors. So we know that there's a broader body of evidence, some emerging from the UK, but a lot from North America, showing the effects of food insecurity on health outcomes, particularly for children. And that food insecurity is associated, and fuel poverty associated with a range of very deleterious food health outcomes for children, things like depressive symptoms, asthma, skin allergies, visits to emergency departments, stomach problems. And very interesting data from Canada, which shows that this food insecurity directly correlates with healthcare costs associated with individuals, and a very steep gradient in terms of healthcare costs for those households that are severely food insecure compared to households that are food secure, on the visual on the right-hand side. So there's a growing body of evidence. We've pulled together a summary of this in a short briefing, which the URL is there if anyone's interested to read about that a little bit further. Next slide, please. So what can we do about this? Obviously, there's a whole range of policy levers which need to be explored to tackle this, not least, of course, maintaining the maintaining benefits in line with real inflation, which is a top priority. One of the things that we've been particularly campaigning for in the last couple of months has been an extension of free school meals to all households with children on universal credit. This is a campaign that's aimed in England, recognising that in Scotland and Wales, obviously the government is moving towards universal provision in primary school, and in Northern Ireland, where the eligibility threshold for free school meals is a lot higher than in England. It's at £14,000, whereas in England you have to be earning less than £7,400 in order to qualify for your child to have free school meals once they've gone through the infants period. So if you could move to the next slide. We're calling on the government in England to make this extension, and to also see this as a stepping stone towards universal provision. And this is a big coalition campaign that the Food Foundation is helping to coordinate, called Feed the Future. If you can move on to the next slide. And so if you are in England and you have and you're willing to write to your MP, you can see here that we've got a big call to action, which has been mobilising across the country. The URL for writing to your MP is there. And this is really asking MPs to support the campaign across parties, and to ask the Prime Minister to make this commitment in the budget on Thursday. And so we've created a huge amount of momentum in the media. In fact, all of the supermarkets today came out in support of the campaign. They're just one of many groups of stakeholders, alongside teachers and doctors, who've all come out very strongly in support of the campaign. And we feel we've created a lot of public momentum, and are hopeful that the government is taking this request seriously, because of the such severe consequences for children at the moment on their diets, when obviously they're growing and are facing the effects of the cost of living crisis at home. That's it from me. Thank you very much.